What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with some Destiny 2 news. And we've got some pretty interesting stuff from this week at Bungie. They talk about Arc Week, the mysterious event that we've had on the roadmap for a little while, and they give us details about exactly what it's going to be. It's actually going to come with a bunch of sandbox changes, especially to subclasses, but of course on top of this, we have a bunch of other changes that are part of the April update that is also going live at the same time. So we're going to break down what's going to be going on next week, as well as a few additional roundups. Bungie hint towards some kind of Crucible changes coming later on this year, so that's certainly interesting. And so if you guys enjoy this video, a rating below super helps me out, but otherwise let's jump straight into it. Getting into things, they talk about Arc Week up first. They say, we're getting ready for some high voltage, and a storm is brewing. Next week, we'll kick off what we're calling Arc Week, and our goal for this happening has been to take the element that makes our sandbox crackle and put it under the microscope. The most notable update is that we improved many Arc subclass paths from the time before Forsaken, and the week will also feature Arc Singe and Arc bounties to synergize with your updated abilities. On top of this, to provide a proving grounds for all of this new energy, Mayhem will be available in the Crucible to let you experiment with your enhanced Arc abilities using shockingly short cooldowns. So that's some pretty curious stuff. Another addition for Arc Week is that Bungie say it will feature one of the most powerful Arc weapons ever created, the Thunderlord exotic machine gun. And if you weren't able to complete the quest to obtain Thunderlord last year, you will have from April 9th to 23rd to revisit the Cosmodrome and add it to your collection. So in terms of the actual event itself, of course Bungie are focusing on a lot of sandbox changes that are kind of linked to all of this stuff going on in the game. Definitely takes a different form to some of the other stuff that we've seen. Now before we talk about sandbox changes, in addition to what Bungie have spoken about with bounties, strikes, and the sandbox changes, there will be some new emotes available, each featuring Arc subclasses. These will be available in bundles for direct purchase though, so you can check those out on Tuesday if you fancy it, which by the way is when all of this is going live on the 9th of April. And what Bungie are doing with Arc Week very strongly links to the sandbox updates. So Bungie say, after the release of Forsaken, the sandbox team wanted to revisit some older subclass paths and freshen them up a bit. This entailed tuning for balance as well as quality of life fixes, and we've also added new functionality to a couple of subclasses. So in update 2.2.1, we're focusing on Arc subclasses for Titans, Hunters, and Warlocks, and this is going to kick off Arc Week. On top of this though, they have made a couple of changes to non-Arc abilities. So in terms of changes to Arc subclasses, for the Striker's Code of the Juggernaut, which of course is the bottom tree for the Striker, they've increased all weapon damage for the duration of the frontal assault buff, so 25% against combatants and 20% against players. On top of this, the duration is increased from 10 seconds to 16 seconds, and the buff timer is now displayed on the HUD. So having Frontal Assault active is actually going to give you bonus weapon damage, which is really pretty interesting. But then for Knockout, melee damage has been increased from 25 to 60%, and it now also triggers once you have dealt 60% damage to a target. So any damage done after 60% will refresh the timer, and it will still also trigger off shield pop, but the melee is no longer consumed after one melee attack, and the duration has been increased from 3 to 5 seconds. So that actually could be some pretty potent stuff right there. But then Bungie talk about the Arc Strider. So for Combination Blow, bonus melee damage can now be stacked 3 times. It will require a melee ability kill for each stack, but the buff increases melee damage by 60% per stack in PvE and 22.7% per stack in PvP. And for comparison, the ability used to be 1 stack and increased melee damage by 50%, and kills with this ability will now heal 40 health in addition to starting health regen. Then for Deadly Reach, they've increased the buff duration from 6 to 8 seconds, and the buff is no longer consumed by a melee hit. So that was Combination Blow and Deadly Reach on the Way of the Warrior Arc Strider, but there is also Way of the Wind. And for Disorienting Blow, they've increased the disorient distance by 50% and increased the duration of disorient on players from 1.5 to 2 seconds. Focused Breathing has seen increased dodge recharge bonus while sprinting by 100%, and Combat Meditation has increased bonus grenade and melee regeneration, while blooded by 25%. They've increased damage resistance while dodging from 25% to 40% in PvP for lightning reflexes, and in PvE that is 63 to 70%. So again, these are very specific changes to Arc subclasses, but they appear to be pretty potent. We do have the Stormcaller's Storm Trance, top and bottom tree, where damage now scales up to 150% over 5 seconds of continuous use of the attack. They've also updated the effects and audio to support this functionality. So that's some pretty crazy stuff. But then there is the attunement of Conduction for the Stormcaller, and Chain Lightning melee can now chain up to 5 times, up from 1, and each individual target can be hit twice. On top of this, chain damage has been decreased from 50 to 31 damage per chain hit, But then for Arc Web, it can now chain to many, many more targets and back and forth between targets. The amount of chaining varies based on use, and they say they'll leave it to the players to discover. On top of this, it will have increased chain range from 10 meters to 12 meters, and chaining arc damage now reduces the cooldown of your grenade, and this works with Arc Web chains and chains from Chain Lightning Melee. You'll earn 3% energy per instance of chain damage in PvE, and 10% in PvP. And then finally, we get onto the Stormcaller's attunement of the elements, which is the bottom tree, and for Electrostatic Surge, they've increased the bonus regeneration rate of Rift by 600% per nearby friendly guardian. They do say this does sound insane, and it is a pretty big boost, but previously it was very low. On top of this, it will extend Rift duration from 15 to 20 seconds, and they've added a notification in the UI for when the buff is actually active. When it comes to Arc Soul, they have extended the duration by 50%. So that's some pretty crazy stuff, guys. And really, this comprises this kind of interesting event that Bungie are doing right here. We've got a sandbox update with some very significant changes to Arc subclasses, and then they really want to kind of feature that with the content that we'll see, you know, Arc Singe, Arc Bounties, Mayhem, and that kind of stuff. So let us know your thoughts about it down below. And of course, we'll have to see if any other things pop up that we're not expecting. But then Bungie talk about non-Arc subclass changes as well. And for the Nova Warp, it is getting a bit of love. They say that they did hit this subclass pretty hard when they nerfed it previously, so now they've reduced the initial charge detonation energy cost by 20%, and reduced energy cost of holding the charge detonation by 7%. They've reduced the time required to fully charge the charge detonation from 0.9 seconds to 0.7 seconds, reduced Dark Blink costs by 20%, and increased base super duration from 18 seconds to 22 seconds. So the super lasts longer, consumes a little bit less energy, and generally you can make those kind of attacks a little bit faster. So let us know your thoughts about that down below. They do say they're trying to kind of ease in to a nicer middle ground change than what they've done before, so hopefully it will be good. But then for the Dawnblade's Everlasting Fire perk, they've tuned the amount of super gained from Everlasting Fire, and the initial return is increased from 10% to 13%, but then the return decays linearly over the course of 30 kills from 13% to 0.75% returned per kill. And Bungie say you may be asking about Spectral Blades. Bungie say they know it's out of bounds, and they're working right now on a few tweaks to bring it back in line. So essentially, Spectral Blades at some point is going to be a bit less potent, but we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. So let us know your thoughts on these changes, guys. But now, we are getting new exotic catalysts into the game. So Bungie say, next week, update 2.2.1 will be deploying on April 9th, and we will be getting 4 new exotic weapon catalysts, which will be available to drop in Nightfalls, Strikes, and the Crucible. So a few different sources, but the Prospector is going to have a catalyst available in the Nightfall, as well as the Rat King catalyst, and the Hardlight catalyst, but then for Soros Regime, that one will drop in the Crucible. So a few new ones to go after right there. Let us know if you'll be chasing any of them down. On top of this, for the patch that we're getting, they fixed an issue where the Bloom ability would not deal damage. Xur's inventory will now offer randomly rolled perks for armor, so we won't have that kind of limited pool of potential bonuses anymore. They fixed an issue where the Vow couldn't be infused above 650, and they say most Gambit Prime weapons will now have a chance to drop as match completion rewards from Prime, so both across Gambit Prime and the Reckoning, there will be increased drop rates for weapons after each completion, without a drop until players are guaranteed a reward. So it should be much more rewarding in terms of weapon drops across the board in Joker's Wild. But there are some changes to Gambit Prime. An Invasion kill will now heal 8% of the Primeval's health down from 12. The Invasion portal cooldown time during the Primeval phase will be increased to 40 seconds up from 30, and this cooldown triggers after a player has been killed or successfully returns from an invasion. And on top of this, Gambit Prime will now unlock the weekly Gambit Prime Clan Engram. There are some additional changes to things like quests and bounties for Gambit, and some other changes that you can see listed in This Week at Bungie. Now on the subject of Crucible, Bungie do say, one more thing before we close this week out. There's been a lot of questions about the future of Crucible and Destiny, and what plans we have to support PvP going forward. Yesterday we let you know during a live stream that we have no plans to remove PvP from the Destiny franchise, and a lot of feedback on the Crucible and how it could improve comes in the form of suggested sandbox changes that would impact the flow of combat in PvP. They do say we have bigger Crucible changes being planned for later this year, but we aren't ready to talk about those plans just yet. We hope to share more with you sometime this summer. In the meantime, we'll continue to provide updates to matchmaking, quality of life, sandbox balance, and glory changes. So the interesting thing they say there is that they're going to share more details sometime this summer, and that the changes are coming later this year. So it's essentially going to be stuff that comes in the September DLC, or whatever format that Bungie, decide to deliver content after the current annual pass. So basically, as of Season 8, we could be looking at some more substantial Crucible changes. And we'll have to see how any potential DLC could pan out later this year as well. But once again, definitely very positive confirmation there from Bungie. But the final mention right here, Ghost73 over on Reddit made a good shout. They are of course buffing the drop rate for 1000 voices, and if you have the opportunity, and you're still trying to get that weapon, of course you can stack up to 5 ethereal keys to open chests in the final room for Last Wish, so it may be worth holding on to any that you get now, until after that drop gets buffed next week, if it is something that you want to pick up. Otherwise guys, for today that is going to summarize the video, so let us know your thoughts down below about the changes coming in that update next week on the 9th. I'd also be curious to hear your thoughts on Arc Week, but if you have enjoyed this video guys, a like below is really appreciated. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe to see everything related to Destiny 2, and turn on those notifications if you don't want to miss out on anything. But otherwise, thank you as always for tuning in, and I will catch you all very soon.